I'd like to tell you a story this morning. It starts out around a campfire in upstate New York in a state park. There are four very articulate, good looking, happy young black adults sitting around a campfire. They're having so much fun. One couple are the parents of Grace. Grace is 5 years old. She's in a cabin inside. They've already put her down to go to sleep. They're checking on her about every 30 minutes. The other couple are the aunt and the uncle of Grace. So they're sitting out there. Dad checked on her at 8 o'clock. His name's Ben. Her mother's name is Rhonda. They had met at New York University. Ben had grown up to be a defense attorney, and his wife, Rhonda, had grown up to be an investment banker. Very successful people, living life, loving it very much. Well, 8:30 was rolling around. It's time to check on little Grace again. Rhonda goes toward the house. They're sitting by the campfire. The other lady talks about the aunt, talks about what a good deal they got on this cabin. And the guys are saying, well, no wonder we got a good deal. Nobody wants to go camping in the winter when it's so cold out here. But they were laughing, they were having a great time, and suddenly they hear a scream from the house. They go racing in there. They find Rhonda. They say, what's the matter? She said, I came in, I just barely opened the door. I was going to quietly look in and check on Grace. As soon as I opened the door, this gust of cold air hit me. It was so cold in that room. I opened the door wide. I saw the window was wide open. The curtains were out of it. I flipped on the light. I looked. Grace was gone. So these four adults panic. They get their flashlights. They go outside. They go in four different directions. They're calling for Grace. They're looking for her. After about 2 minutes of that and no success, somebody calls the park rangers. The park rangers call the police. The police think this sounds like a kidnapping. They call the FBI. Well, it's not long before all these law enforcement people show up. Everybody, all the adults, those four adults are in tears. They don't know where this child has vanished to. They bring in the dogs to start sniffing and looking for her. They're not having any luck at all. And they don't know what they're going to do. They send some drones up, and the drones have heat sensors, and they're flying over the wooded area. It's rolling hills with a lot of trees. Now, while the parents had been there was a man in the woods on top of a hill watching all that was going on. Well, they send the drones up. They haven't found anybody. They see a heat signal. They think it could be a human being. So they radio in the ears, the headpieces of the FBI agents, there's somebody on the move less than a quarter mile, go in this direction. So they go in the direction of the heat signal. Maggie, the FBI agent, sees somebody, yells, FBI, stop. The person starts to run. Maggie goes after this guy, takes him down quickly, cuffs him, rolls him over, gets her camera out on her cell phone, turns the light on, takes a picture of him, sends it in for ID. He had no ID on him. The word comes back shortly that he's a wanted criminal. There's a warrant for his arrest, and he has been convicted already of child abuse of his own daughter. So they're pretty rough with this guy. They're questioning him, and he denies having anything to do. They said, have you seen anybody else around? And he said, yeah, I saw somebody with a red shirt who had a little girl. They were down by the pond. Said, describe the little girl. Well, the little girl looked to be 3, 4, 5 years old. She was little. She didn't seem to want to be with this man. She was not very cooperative, and he was trying to get her somewhere. I saw them by the pond. I knew where they were camping. I went back to the campsite. That's when I saw the parents, and I realized the police were on the way. I needed to get out of there. He said, well, tell us about this other person. What did you see? He said, all I know, it was down by the pond, dark hair, slender, red shirt. Well, about this time, they discover a campsite that appears to be recently abandoned. The fire was still burning. All the stuff was there. There was no car. It was just out in the middle of the woods, deserted. They find the red shirt. He had seen somebody with a red shirt, so he said. But he's a suspicious character. Two FBI agents go to the pond where they had seen him with the little girl. They get to the pond, they look around, they find blood on a rock. They run the DNA. It's a match for little Grace. They get close to the water's edge. Her doll is in the water. They call in the scuba divers. They're hoping they're not going to find her body on the bottom of the lake. They're still looking for her. They're still tracking things down. They tell the parents, listen, you need to go get a hotel room and stay there. We need to get in touch with you. We're going to need more information. So the parents go to a hotel. Well, in the meantime, the home office of the FBI is checking out everybody they can think of. There's only the man that they had caught. Supposedly, there was another person there. They also found a footprint near the water's edge that was a size 12. They decided that was a fresh footprint where the doll was found. It was brand new, and the man they had arrested and sent in with the local police had a much smaller foot than that. That led them to question what's going on. They go to the hotel room. They talk with the wife. In the meantime, they got more information on Ben, the father. Looks squeaky clean at first look. Practicing defense attorney, no criminal record, everything's fine. But they realized when he was 18 years old, he had his name changed. So they looked at who he was before he changed his name. When he was 12 years old, he'd been convicted of murdering a little girl in the woods. Not good. They wonder about it. When he was 18 years old, on his 18th birthday, they released him from the detention center that he just spent 6 years in. He immediately changed his name, enrolled in New York University, where he met Rhonda, his wife, and went on to be a great student and get his law degree and become a defense attorney. Well, they go to the hotel room. They're talking with the wife, said, where's your husband? Said, he's not here right now. He went out to get some air. He's really upset about this. Omar, the other FBI agent, while Maggie's talking to the lady, is looking through stuff, finds a man's shoe, picks it up. It's a size 12. Now, they're really wondering where this guy is. They get a message when they finish talking with her. They realize she has no idea of his past history. She has no idea that she married somebody who had killed a little girl before. And she's kind of just, she doesn't know what's going on with that. They don't tell her at the time. They leave the room. They check with the FBI headquarters, and FBI headquarters said, hey, this guy just took $140,000 out of a nearby Bank of America. We need to run him down. He may be on the run. Well, about that time, they get to the parking lot. He pulls into the parking lot. Omar flashes a badge at him. He hits the gas, takes off. Maggie drives the big FBI SUV around the other side of the parking lot, blocks him. Omar's on the run after him. He jumps out of his car, starts running away. Omar was a ranger in the Army before he became an FBI agent, takes him down hard. The guy is yelling and screaming and crying and saying, you don't understand. We just got a ransom message. I've got to have $200,000 to this guy by midnight tonight, or by sundown tonight, or he's going to kill my daughter. So they're thinking, okay, he was looking pretty guilty, but now there's a ransom demand. Maybe he's not the guy. In the meantime, they said, hey, we've been studying Ben. He was looking suspicious. We've picked up different camera, and we see where he's been. There's a van that's been there 3 different times. Across the street from the courthouse, another place where he was, where he got the burner phone. This van, it's just a utilities van for an energy company. that's been in three places where Ben was. It looks like somebody stalking him. They found out who it was. Well, the little girl that Ben had killed was named Lucy Parkin. They find out a guy who's driving this van who appears to be following Ben, the defense attorney, the father of the girl. They figure out that this guy is named Ray Parkin. He was the older brother of the little girl who was killed. And when she was killed, Ray was 17 years old. His mother committed suicide after losing her daughter. His father became an alcoholic and shortly thereafter died because of liver problems. Ray had a criminal record. He had been at the courthouse one day, the same day Ben was there. He saw Ben. He recognized him. He followed him. He found out his phone number, where he lived, what he drove. He'd been stalking him, and he was the one demanding the ransom that afternoon. Well, they take Ben back to the room after they've tackled him, and they say, listen, you haven't told your wife who you really are, and either you do or we do. So he went in and he confessed who he was, what had happened. Well, she went a little bit ballistic. She says, I just got to get some air. She steps out. They both focus on him to find out more about this other guy and about the ransom demands. As she goes out, they're talking to him, and they hear screeching in the parking lot of tires. They look out the window. She's taken the backpack with $140,000 and the burner phone from the ransom notice, and she's gone. Well, they try to follow her. They're tracking her vehicle. 4 FBI agents get there. When they get to the scene, they find the car. She's nowhere around. They go in 4 different directions. Maggie, the female FBI agent, is walking around, hears voices, looks through a construction fence, hears mom with the backpack and a guy shaking and crying and hysterical saying, he was supposed to come. I don't want you. I want him. I'm going to kill him, and I'm going to take all his money because he killed my sister. Maggie sees this escalating. She's 20 feet away. She's around the corner. She steps out and she says, FBI, drop the weapon. He looks at her. He turns. He fires twice. She ducks behind the corner, steps out, pops 2 shots, center mass, drops him. He's dead when he hits the ground. Nobody knows where Grace is. He was the only hope. Now he's dead. They're panicky. They don't know what to do. They start looking. All they find on him is a key for room 108. Call FBI agency. They find hotels in the area known for sex trafficking. They go to the hotel room 108. Obviously, Grace had been there, but she's gone. They don't know what to do. They go out in the parking lot and they recognize there's a black Subaru. Well, Ray had stolen a black Subaru from his roommate. They recognized that car. They looked in the windows, no sign of this child. And they heard a thump in the car and another thump. He broke the window. He opened the back end. He lifted a deck lid, and there was little Grace. All right. You wonder, what does this have to do with Bible study today? What you see here is what's been going on for thousands of years. God created law so that civilizations could live together. And it's the responsibility of the God-ordained governments to enforce the law to protect good people from evil people. But it's the responsibility of individuals to love each other. We continue our study of the Sermon on the Mount today. We're going to be in Matthew chapter 5, beginning with verse 38. This is the 5th statement where Jesus says, you've heard that is said, of old, but I say to you. Now, we've had four of these statements already. It's like you've heard it said of old, thou shalt not commit murder. You've heard it said of old that you should not commit adultery, but I say to you, what had happened over hundreds of years was the Jewish leaders had taken God's law and God's intention, which they realized was impossible for them to be as good as God wanted them to be. And they lowered it to a level where they can say, okay, I haven't murdered, I'm good enough. Okay, I haven't committed adultery, I'm good enough. Now, they might hate people, they might lust a lot every day, but they think, I've done nothing wrong. They reduced God's laws down low enough that they could do it on their own. And Jesus is trying to teach people, hey, this is not what God intended. So, what we're going to look at today, and it's important to realize, we got this great big thick Bible. And with this great big thick Bible, God has told us what works and what doesn't work for human beings. Now, keep in mind, He is a God of love. He's not an egomaniac. I drove my parents crazy all of my childhood. I was the kid that never ran out of questions, always wanted to do something I shouldn't do, constantly saying, well, why? Well, why? Well, why? Well, ultimately, when I wore my parents down, they would say, because I said so. God's not like that. He says, hey, let me tell you what works, what doesn't work. Now, if you want to trust me, great. If you don't, you want to test it for yourself, knock yourselves out, which you will. So Jesus is trying to bring light to the situation and help us get back to God's intention. The reason I talk about the FBI story is because you see government authorities that are here to protect us. This couple didn't really want to work with the FBI because the ransom note said no police. They just wanted their daughter back. They just charged the police, but the police were there to help them. This poor man whose sister had been killed tried to take vengeance on his own outside the law, and he ended up dead. So it's important, and this will change your life only in the sovereignty of God. We started this study of the Sermon on the Mount back in, I think, September. And we're just now about to get through the first chapter of 3. It's a lot of stuff. God knew this would be the first lesson for the new year. So, what we're going to see here is God is teaching us living a life of non-resistance. When you live a life of non-resistance, you're going to benefit because it's going to keep you out of trouble with God and man. It's also going to keep you from attracting bad things from other people, and it's going to help you feel better. Now, is that not a pretty good way to start the new year? It will make your life better. So this is what Jesus has to say in Matthew 5:38. You have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, do not resist the one who is evil. But if someone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to him the other also. And if anyone would sue you and take your tunic, let him have your cloak as well. And if anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with him 2 miles. Give to the one who begs from you, and do not refuse the one who would borrow from you. He is teaching us to live a life of non-resistance. Now, let's look at where this comes from. God created the law. In fact, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth goes back to the tablets of Hammurabi, which is the oldest law in recorded history. It's been around a long time. It's a good law when it's handled by the government. In Exodus chapter 21, verse 23, this is what it says. But if there is harm, then you pay life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burn, wound for wound, stripe for stripe. That's the law. That is supposed to be carried out by government authorities, not individuals. God's intention for individuals, and this is Old Testament too, is that we love other people. So we look at that. Then we look at what Romans has to say in chapter 13, verse 1. Let every person be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and those that exist have been instituted by God. Therefore, whoever resists the authorities resist what God has appointed, and those who resist will incur judgment. For rulers are not a terror to good conduct, but to bad. Would you have no fear of the one who is in authority? Then do what is good, and you will receive his approval. For he is God's servant for your good. But if you do wrong, be afraid, for he does not bear the sword in vain. For he is the servant of God, an avenger who carries out God's wrath for the wrongdoer. The first benefit you get for living a life of non-resistance is that it keeps you out of trouble with God and with other people. We're going to go into more detail about the law of resistance. But what is our responsibility? We go back a chapter to Romans 12, starting in verse 9. Let love be genuine. Abhor what is evil. Hold fast to what is good. Love one another with brotherly affection. Outdo one another in showing honor. Verse 14, bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse them. Verse 17, repay no one evil for evil, but give thought to do what is honorable in the sight of all. If possible, as far as it depends on you, live peaceably with all. Beloved, never avenge yourselves, but leave it to the wrath of God. For it is written, vengeance is mine. I will repay, says the Lord. To the contrary, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he's thirsty, give him something to drink, so that by doing so you will heap burning coals on his head. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. I want to make this very clear. It's going to keep you out of trouble with God and man. That's the benefit, is God has given us authorities to protect good people from evil people. It's the government's job and God's job to administer punishment and vengeance. The vengeance is God's. He says it's not your job. Your job is to love people. Jesus is bringing a massive correction. He's bringing love back to the law. He's bringing relationships back to the rules. And your new year is going to be so much easier if you stop resisting evil. It's going to keep you out of trouble. Now, here's how the law of resistance works. You cannot resist anything without giving it your attention. Whatever you give your attention to, you're giving your energy to. Whatever you give energy to naturally tends to expand. The second benefit we see of keeping you out of trouble with God and other people, it's going to keep you from attracting bad things from other people. I'll never forget years ago, I was in Minneapolis, Minnesota, in a conference with Paul Sheely, and he was talking about how parents handle their children. A child may come home with 4 A's and 1 B. Well, the parents will commend and affirm and encourage the child, maybe for a minute or two, about those 4 A's and say, "You did really good. We're so proud of you." And then the next 2 hours will be about the B. He said the wise parents will spend the whole 2 hours talking to that child about how proud they are of those 4 A's. And they'll get the child to talking about it. How did you make an A in English? How did you make an A in history? How did you make the A in math? How did you make the A in art? We're so proud. Tell us how you did it. And well, this just builds the child up. And the child starts realizing he can do anything when he works at it. So you got these two kids. One's been hammered down for the B. The other one's been built up for the A's. Which one do you think is most likely to have straight A's the next time? We have a tendency sometimes to focus on what's negative about people. There is some hard science out on this. Many years ago, at the Heart Math Institute, they rounded up 24 people that were very much in touch with their emotions. These people could feel whatever they wanted to feel at will. And they got some placenta tissue, which is our most pristine form of DNA, and they put it in test tubes. They went to the first control group. They passed out 12 test tubes to 12 people. They said, "We want you to hold this test tube and feel hatred, loathe, despise what's in this test tube. And then we'll get it back from you in a few minutes." So the people just sat in a room and they just felt really bad things to this test tube they're holding. Then they put it under the microscope and looked at it. The DNA that had been hated, despised, loathed, had constricted, had contracted, had become smaller, and parts of it's binary, it's either on or off, parts of it had shut down, especially the parts related to our immune system. The other group of 12 people were given their test tubes. They were asked to feel love, feel appreciation for this test tube that you're holding in your hand. They did it for a few minutes. They took it, they looked at it again. It had relaxed, it had elongated, and parts that had been turned off before turned on during that process. It makes a difference in other people, what we think and feel about them. You might think of me as a Coke machine. I've got about 10 big buttons across my chest. One is for love, understanding, grace, sympathy, empathy. Then you got another row: anger, rage, wrath, hostility, vengeance. You push my buttons with what you think and how you feel about me. Think about the people you like to be with, the people who love you, who like you the most. They're not focused on your flaws. They're focused on what they love about you, and they give their attention to what's good about you. Therefore, they give their energy to what's good about you. Therefore, what's good about you expands. It goes the other way. If you focus on what's wrong with somebody, it's going to go and it's going to activate what you do not want. This is why Jesus is teaching us de-escalate things. Don't engage. Somebody offends you, somebody makes your life harder, somebody does something, de-escalate it as quickly as you can. They heard things differently in those days. We listen to Jesus and it's too big of a leap for most of us because it's not what he meant. When we think, he said, if somebody asks for your shirt, give them your coat as well. In those days, it was law that you could take somebody's top coat that would keep them warm at night, but at sunset, you had to give it back every day. It was the law. So people heard things differently. It's like if somebody's taking you to jail and they're trying to sue you, offer that second offering of goodwill. It's not a huge thing, but it says, I really am trying to make you happy. I really am trying to help you with this. There was a school teacher in rural America. It was her second year at this school. She was the youngest teacher teaching fourth grade. One teacher had been there for close to 40 years, another for 30, another for 20. And she knew I'm going to have to be here for at least another 20 years before I have any hope at all of having seniority to get the best class. Well, at the beginning of her second year teaching there, she got a list of her coming students. And as the students were coming in, she was looking over their paperwork and she realized, I don't know how this happened. She was looking at different columns of numbers and she saw 120 to 140. She thought, oh my gosh, I'm getting children with IQs of 120 to 140. Somehow, some way, I've got the accelerated class. She was so excited about this. She started out that class with the best attitude toward these students. They outperformed the other fourth grade classes. Near the end of the semester, the principal called her in and said, how have you done this? And she said, what? How have you got such high performance out of this group of students? We need you to teach the other teachers how to teach. And they're talking about this. She didn't know what he's talking about. And they finally discover what she thought were their IQs, were their locker numbers, because she believed they were high performing students. She got that. She saw it. She thought it. She felt it. She activated in them, and they outperformed the other classes. This stuff really works. So when you think about being non-resistant, letting things go as quickly and easily as possible, it's going to stop you from activating bad things in other people towards you. You can really turn people around by simply loving them. The third benefit you have is you're going to feel better when you live God's way, as you let it go. Now, think about, as a human being, you've got two primal emotions. One feels good, one feels bad. The Bible would call the good one love, the bad one fear. Love feels good, fear feels bad. We don't like people because of fear. Every good feeling we have is rooted in love. Every bad feeling we have is rooted in fear. So when people come against us, it scares us if we think they're going to take something from us. It scares us if we think they're going to disrespect us. It causes fear. Sometimes that manifests itself as anger or resentment or bitterness or revenge. When we do that, we are choosing bad feelings. Nobody can control another person's emotions. You can influence them, but each individual is in charge of their own emotions. Very unfortunately, in our culture, we have been very well trained how to think. We've been trained how to get our bodies to do what they should do. But most people have never had a single course in emotional mastery. That's what made Tony Robbins famous and successful. He taught emotional mastery. It's what I've devoted my life to, is learning where our emotions come from, how to control them, so that we don't have to depend on external things to determine how we feel. So when you choose to think about good things, feelings follow thoughts. That is psychological law. You know this from your own personal experience. You start thinking about the next vacation to your favorite place, with your favorite people, with your favorite restaurants, with your favorite activities, with your favorite temperature, your favorite scenery, and you just start feeling better and better and better. You start thinking about the next 2 or 3 root canals, and it tanks you. You start thinking about tax seasons coming around April 15th. I got to give all those taxes. I'm probably going to owe more money than I want to owe. And you just start feeling worse and worse and worse. So when you choose to live a non-resistant life, you have less resistance. You stop causing the things you're resisting to persist. The law of resistance simply says what you resist persists. So what do? You obey Philippians 4:8. Finally, brothers, whatever is true, noble, right, pure, lovely, admirable, excellent, praiseworthy, think on such things. Even if somebody has done you wrong, pivot from the bad thoughts about them, about the situation, to the good thoughts. How are you going to do that? It's going to come down to faith. Do you trust God? Do you believe his word? It's a promise. We usually think of promises of God as good things, positive things. One of his promises in Romans 12 is vengeance is mine, says the Lord. I will repay. We slow God down when we get between him and a person that we're resisting. If we get ourselves out of the way, there have been a few times in life I've done the right thing. I forgave somebody. I was nice to them. I continued to love them, even though they might have cost me a whole lot. And I've watched God deal with people. Oh my goodness. I watch people self-destruct, destroy their families, destroy their marriages, destroy their careers. That everything comes undone if I'll stay out of God's way. So start thinking about what happens when you have a conflict with a spouse, with a significant other, with a child, with a parent, with a business associate. What if, and we know sooner or later everybody will bother us, what if we just let it slide? What if we said, I'm just going to obey God and love you no matter how you act? I think God's going to keep his promises. I think God's going to reward you. Have you ever thought about how much time you have wasted being upset about things? People that just have done something and you just don't put it out of your mind. I didn't say, and you just can't put it out of your mind. You just don't. You dwell on it. You resist it. You hate it. You wish it hadn't happened. You're thinking, how can I get even without getting caught in trouble with God? That's just how we operate. But if you learn just to let things go and believe God is going to see me through, God is going to take care of me, God's going to make this right. It's so important to understand God created huge governments with laws to protect good people from evil people. Let the authorities handle it. Your job is to love people. Jesus made it real simple. When you love God and your neighbor and yourself, you fulfill all of the law and the prophets. Well, that sure is a tough commandment. Love feels so good. God, do you really want me to just feel love all the time? Yeah, he does. It's for your own good. It's going to make you feel better. And it's going to make you higher vibration. You'll become a magnet for better and better and better things. The better you feel. Look at your own life. Sometimes days just go wrong. You wake up and something bad happens, and that puts you in a bad mood. And then you attract something else bad. And now you've had two bad things. That puts you in a worse mood. And now you attract something worse, and you're in a downward spiral. Learn to turn the spiral away. Bad stuff's going to happen. Dr. David R. Hawkins talked about how you can heal yourself. Two different people wake up in the morning. One doesn't understand any of this, and they wake up and they think, oh my gosh, my throat's scratchy. I think I'm getting sick. He said every thought triggers a biological chemical response in our body. So they think, oh my goodness, I think I'm getting sick. They trigger a toxin. Oh my gosh, I think I'm getting a sore throat. Toxin, toxin. Oh my goodness. Gosh, I might be getting the flu. Toxin, toxin, toxin. Oh my gosh, it could be the bird flu. Toxin, toxin, toxin. That kills people. Toxin, toxin. Before they know it, they have flooded their system with toxic chemicals and they feel sick and they get sick and they wipe out their immune system and they pick up whatever's around. The person who understands, who's living a non resistant life, wakes up and thinks, oh, my throat's scratchy this morning. Toxin, but I know how to fix it. They release medicine. I'll drink some hot tea with honey and lemon in it. Medicine, medicine. That will make me feel better. Medicine, medicine, medicine. I've seen these things come and go. I'm gonna take some extra vitamin C today. That usually knocks out stuff early on. Medicine, medicine, medicine. By controlling your thoughts, you control your biochemical processes. It's huge. You can make yourself sick thinking about sickness. You can make yourself sick thinking about what other people have done for you, or you can think and feel the way God commands you to. I'll wrap it up with an illustration from Dr. John MacArthur. He's one of the best biblical expositors living today. Huge church in California, speaks to millions of people every week, really, really understands his Bible well. Well, some good person in his church years ago had given him a brand new bag full of high-end golf clubs. He was so excited. Not only was it a great set of clubs, this person had had each one of those clubs engraved with his initials and an ichthus, the little sign of the early Christian church. He was so excited. He's out, he's playing golf, he's already driven. He gets up to a place, he's still got a ways to go to get to the green. He pulls out his 5-iron and he's setting up for the shot. He's thinking, okay, God, what can you do with your new 5-iron? Let's see. Pulls back, pops that ball really hard. It takes off, but it starts to hook. It lands in the backyard of somebody who lives on the golf course. That happens often. The problem was the man was in his backyard when it hit. And he yells out at the top of his lungs, good shot, expletive. Called him a really nasty, dirty name. Well, he's pulling his cart with his clubs. He starts headed that way, kind of the walk of shame. He watches this guy. The ball had landed on the guy's grass in his backyard, but it sloped down, and then there was just a dirt wall where it just the grass stopped and it just fell off. And the ball had rolled back down to the bottom of that dirt wall on the side of the fairway. Well, he's watching this guy. He's a long way off. The guy comes down, picks up the ball, puts it in his pocket. He knows, the guy knows he hit it because he's already said nice shot and called him a bad name. So he's getting closer. By this time, the guy's up on top in his backyard. And he said, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to do it. I'm just not that good of a golfer. Don't get to play that often. I'm really sorry. Could I have my ball back? And the guy says, nope, I'm a golfer too. Puts in his pocket, turns and walks off in a huff. Well, his first thought to that was just like any of them. You like that ball so much? Let me hit you about 8 more. Let's see if I can't get some windows too. And he thought, no, no, no. And he realized, oh my goodness, this is what I'm going to be speaking on in church and on the radio this week. I think God's seeing if I understand. What should I do? This guy has really been hostile. And he starts to thinking, this poor man obviously has plenty of money, living on a beautiful golf course, but he's got such a bad attitude. I didn't do him any damage, but I probably hurt his pride, maybe caused him to feel a little bit disrespected. And he could have met a good Christian speaker, one of the most famous preachers on the planet. And he just didn't have any interest at all. What a miserable existence. He thought, since he liked that ball so much, he wanted to keep it. I'm going to send him a box of 12 balls like that with the sweetest note I can write. That's what we're supposed to do. People treat us badly. We're instructed in Romans to return good for evil. It's counterintuitive, especially for we guys. We've grown up with rugged individualism. John Wayne was our poster boy. He's big, he's strong, he didn't take anything off of anybody. That's not the way Jesus lived. Jesus was stronger and tougher than John Wayne. It takes a lot of discipline to obey God, but you're going to benefit. It's going to keep you out of trouble with God and people. It's going to keep you from attracting more and more bad stuff from people that you don't want. And it's going to cause you to feel so much better.